The voice you are about to hear is that of Arturo Toscanini at a rehearsal of the NBC Symphony Orchestra as they prepare Kodai's Ariano suite for recording.
Quando da trompetta, tam bim pam 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 pam, trompetta, ogni trompetta. Yes, number one. The trompetta. So, jam, pam, pam, non tutto, so.
You're listening to Toscanini, the man behind the legend. This is Ben Grauer. Welcome once again to another edition of NBC's commemorative series, Toscanini, the man behind the legend. On our broadcast, we'll hear two musical works, the Variations on a Theme of Haydn by Johannes Brahms and Kodai's Ariano suite. During intermission, it will be our pleasure to have as our guest another friend and colleague of Maestro Toscanini's for an informal interview, Alfredo Antonini. Later, we'll go backstage to revisit an NBC Symphony rehearsal to hear Maestro at work. Our program begins now as we hear the NBC Symphony Orchestra under the baton of Arturo Toscanini in the Variations on a Theme of Haydn by Johannes Brahms. Orchestra under Arturo Toscanini in Brahms' Variations on a Theme of Haydn. Arturo Toscanini and the NBC Symphony Orchestra in Brahms' Variations on a Theme of Haydn. Our concert will be resumed in just a moment following a brief pause for station identification. The Variations on a Theme of Haydn by Johannes Brahms has been performed by the NBC Symphony Orchestra under the baton of Arturo Toscanini, bringing us to intermission time. Each week we bring before our NBC microphones friends and colleagues of Maestro Toscanini to talk with them of their association and work during his long career on the podium. Our guest tonight we feel has a most unusual story. Seated across the table from me is the distinguished musical director of CBS and conductor of the Tampa, Florida Symphony Orchestra, Alfredo Antonini. Well, Mr. Antonini, in our chats with colleagues, musical friends, musicians who played under Maestro Toscanini, in all of these, we've had the first meeting when they were mature people. But you met Maestro, I believe, when you were...
At the age, I was 13 and a half.
Oh, really?
Right.
That was in your...
In Milano.
In Milano.
In Milano, right.
How did that come about?
See, the Maestro was conducting the symphony orchestra there, which was organized just to boost the morals of the Italians. You know,
What
it was
year
after
was this?
1917.
Just as the war was coming to an end.
To an end, and it was after a very bad defeat of the Italian army, Caporetti. Which was felt very much. So it was a symphony orchestra was organized in Milano for the Maestro to conduct. Imagine a symphony orchestra. I can say you heard of the Maestro with the best orchestra in the world. I can tell you, I recall the Maestro with the worst orchestra in the world. I tell you the reason why. That orchestra was formed of people from 55 up.
All the others were in the army.
Yes, all the others were in the
All
army.
the able-bodied men.
Right, and if it was somebody younger than 55, he must have been with a foot on the grave.
Yes.
So the Maestro was looking for somebody who could play Celeste and the Glockenspiel with the keyboard, Glockenspiel. So asked the director of the conservatory if there was a young boy who could do that. So one day I was called by the director.
Oh, you were a student at the conservatory?
Yes, student in Milano.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine called by the director in his office, afraid to death. I don't know what I had done now, what is next. And he asked me, he says, look, the Maestro is looking for somebody, and I chose you. He says, will you go downstairs? He's rehearsing now. I say downstairs because the concert hall in Milano is inside the conservatory.
Mm-hmm.
He says, will you go downstairs? And you go to the Maestro and say, I send you. So imagine I go downstairs, what I see. The orchestra all on the stage. Nobody move, nobody playing a note. And the Maestro going up and down, up and down. It was one of his famous outbursts.
Yes.
So I didn't have the courage to go near him. After a while, took all my courage, 2 hands, and I went near the Maestro. I says, Maestro, I am Alfredo Antonini, the director. Send me to you. He says, all right. I says, go and sit down. Stand there, did the Celeste. I will come there. Imagine, scared to that. He came and asked me, he says, sir, you never played in an orchestra. Can you count? I said, yeah, I try. He says, all right. He says, you're going to play. He says, you watch me. And you know what was the number? It was the first time performing it. I think it was his time. First time he performed Petrushka.
Oh.
Can you imagine?
With plenty of counting in that.
Imagine for me, to listen to Petrushka at the age of 13 was a revelation, that kind of music. And I can assure you, never playing an orchestra, all that change of tempo, I didn't know where I was, and pleading the harpist to tell me, to help me out and so on. But believe me, it was so like in a fog. Until a few bars before my entrance, everything cleared up. I could see the smile, the eyes of the Maestro bringing me in. And
giving you your entrance.
The entrance, keep like you have a child, you make him walk. So it was such a revelation. I mean, all different tempo, everything came so simple and so easy. Then when I saw the music for the first time, I says, I will never be able to play.
A 13-year-old boy, trembling with fear.
You can imagine.
And he led you right in.
Right in was but I want to tell you something. You know, only a young boy can do that. After 2 or 3 performances, 2 or 3 weeks, he performed again for the first time in Italy the Apprentice Sorci, the Sorcerer's Apprentice.
Sorcerer's Apprentice.
Yes. And there was a small little part for the Glockenspiel. Mm-hmm. And says, you play the Glockenspiel.
Well, it's a big part, the Glockenspiel.
So I felt, says, how can he? I heard the composition. I played the first time. Then I figured, how can he hear me? My part is doubling with the piccolo. Everybody's playing such a loud playing the orchestra. How can he hear me? So I said, I'm going to test him. Only a young fellow Maestro can do that, Responsible.
You are going to test Maestro.
They say he hears everything and says, impossible. Only, just a fresh young kid can do that. And believe me, I didn't come in, and I smiled to him like if I was playing. I was turned, just facing him, so
but your instrument was hidden.
Yes, he couldn't see my hands.
So
and
made believe you were.
I tell you, he stopped, and you're acquainted with his outburst. What happened? He almost used his corporal strength on me. That was a lesson, you can be sure. From then on, I didn't play any more tricks.
On Maestro.
On Maestro, exactly.
Well, this is 1917. You were a boy, 13, 14. Maestro in his late 40s, I think.
Yes.
When did you next see Maestro?
Oh, but that time, that continued very much. I tell you now, when there was an incident very interesting. In I think it was in 1921 or 22, they organized in Italy what was supposed the best symphony orchestra. They were choosing musicians from all over Italy to come here to America with the Maestro.
Oh, the La Scala Orchestra.
They gave them the Italian orchestra. It was called the Italian because they were not from La Scala, from all over Italy.
You're quite right. I remember.
And that time, he wanted to bring in, he need one man who could play celeste, piano, and everything, and all the keyboard instruments. And he had chosen me, and I was so young, I couldn't go ahead. It was my last year of conservatorio and so on. I couldn't break the study. And I was heartbroken, and he knew it. And then he invited me, instead of to give me the news, he invited me to his home. It was the first time I went to his house in Via Dorini.
Dorini.
Now it doesn't exist. It's called Via Toscanini. Yeah. I saw in Milano last year.
It exists in a new field.
In a new field, exactly. And I went to his home, and he was like a father, so sweet. I knew him all the time, screaming, hollow. And that time it was just a father. And I remember in his studio to cross so many rooms, and then we had a big stand with something from the Gregorian chant, some music, Gregorian chant, and I was there, and he says, all right, my dear boy, don't worry. When I come back, I take you with me as an assistant on La Scala, and so on. I tell you, the kindness he had, I will never forget as long as I live.
Instant, and he understood what your heart needed and gave it to you.
Right.
Now, then you saw Maestro.
Yes, I came in America in 28. I went to see him in the Philharmonic. Imagine when he saw me. I was a little fresh, Lots of time he almost beat me up, more than once. And, having so many old men in the orchestra was this little child. I was like a mascot in the orchestra.
You never faked an entrance after that.
Oh, you can be sure about it.
Alfredo Antonini, you have many years of musical professional career years, I'd say, behind you. You've heard great conductors. You conduct yourself. You know Maestro warmly and with deep affection, as we sense as we talk with you. Now I'd like to ask you, as a man of music, what was the quality that Maestro had, do you think? What was the special quality?
The special quality was this. First, perfectionism. First. It's like you hear a great violinist never playing concerto, never hear him play a wrong note, playing out of tune. The last word of perfection. This is in technique. In warmth, many times you hear Toscanini was just a perfectionist. Believe me, it's not true. But he was honest, sincere, and justice to the composer. No, that exaggerate, I can use a word only, schmaltz, not that exact. Just the retard was just what is required by the music with that great refinement. And then is another thing. Never could you hear him change a dynamic, change a tempo of the indication of the composer, of the great master. The sincerity, the honesty, and the perfection.
Alfredo Toscanini translates his grandfather's recollections.
One night at a dinner party, some of grandfather's friends asked him to tell them about the first time he conducted in Rio. Luckily, my father had the presence of mind to turn on the tape recorder. So now we have the complete story just as he told it that night. He told the story in Italian on the tape, and if you like, I'll try to translate what he said. Right now, as we begin to hear his voice, he is telling about coming late to the theater, finding everything in a great state of confusion, and he tells of sitting in the orchestra pit, trying to find out what was going on, and also worried because he didn't have enough money to get back to Italy. At this moment, grandfather is saying,
un abbonato, vieni qua, ma in orchestra non c'è nessuno che può dirigere la Ida. Il mio secondo violoncino.
One of the subscribers came into the pit and said, "Isn't there anyone in the orchestra who can conduct Aida?" And the second cello pointed to me. And everybody in the orchestra thought I could do that and more. And I ran up onto the stage to get away from the musicians. But there it was even worse because everyone in the chorus knew that I knew the opera. And all the singers had rehearsed with me. Napoliciò, Figner, and there was a singer named Leone who was there, and she was very ugly, and she started to cry, "Save us, save us." And she started speaking to me and said, "But Toscanini, go and conduct." I was stunned. I didn't know what to do or what to say. I'd never conducted and I didn't want to. And the impresario came over to me, and he was about my size, and he wanted me to put his tuxedo jacket on. And I'd just been out of the conservatory, and I still had my conservatory uniform on, like a soldier's uniform with brass buttons. And I said, no, if I'm going to conduct, I'm going to conduct just the way I'm dressed. And so I went to conduct. I knew all the operas, and I used to play them on the piano, and everybody knew that I had a memory. All the singers had rehearsed with me, and I never looked at the music, I knew it by heart. And therefore I went from the frying pan to the fire. In the orchestra, there was the subscriber who wanted me to conduct. On the stage, all the singers and chorus. My head felt dizzy as I went into the pit, almost as if I were stunned. When I went on the podium, I saw the orchestra below me, and I wasn't scared. But when the curtain rose, and I heard the singers, and the singer's voice always comes a little late. And for a second, I had a moment where I thought I couldn't conduct, I couldn't move my arm. Now, my arm was used to playing the cello and not conducting. But the minute the chorus came on, I started to conduct, and I really conducted, because the opera I knew by heart, and I knew it well. At the conservatory, I had the habit of arranging music, and in order to learn orchestration, I used to orchestrate music for small orchestras. Therefore, I knew how to move my arm a little. I had no technique for conducting, but I conducted.
You are listening to Toscanini, the man behind the legend. Earlier in our program, we brushed away the curtains of time to eavesdrop for a brief moment on a rehearsal conducted by Arturo Toscanini as they were preparing the music we're to hear next on our program, the orchestral suite from the opera Are János of Zoltán Kodály. Let's revisit that rehearsal and listen as Maestro patiently instructs the men of the orchestra in details concerning the performance. Last-minute instructions, as it were, before the score was recorded. And then as you hear him say, from the beginning, join us in listening to the performance itself. First, the moments of instruction, and then Kodály's Are János suite.
4, 6, the accord before number 4, this accord, anticadetta, pur crescendo, and then forte piano, in number 4. Forte piano, ma piano, piano. No, in number place. And in number place also. Tira, tara, tira, tara, tira, after 4, yes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, on the sixth bar after O, put another crescendo, another crescendo. From the beginning.
Arturo Toscanini and the NBC Symphony Orchestra have just performed the orchestral suite from the opera Arianos by Zoltan Kodály as the concluding work on NBC's special broadcast series, Toscanini, the Man Behind the Legend. Earlier, we heard variations on the theme of Haydn by Johannes Brahms, and our intermission guest was Alfredo Antonini. Next week, another unusual broadcast. Highlights from Verdi's opera Falstaff. And our intermission guest will be the distinguished basso from the Metropolitan Opera, Norman Scott. You are most cordially invited to join us on your favorite NBC station. Script materials for this series are taken from the files of the Toscanini family at Riverdale, New York, and the programs are produced for NBC under the supervision of Don Gillis. This is Ben Grauer speaking.
One in a series of programs produced at NBC in 1963. Additional material for this presentation came from the Toscanini archives. With post-production by William P. Hay and editing by Sherry Hutchinson, this program is brought to you by the South Carolina Educational Radio Network. Major funding is from Cooper Industries Incorporated and Mr. and Mrs. G. Richard Shafto. Additional funding comes from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. This is NPR, National Public Radio.